senators question the military's medical screening system, and a spike in troops dealing with a medical condition tied to shaving. All that and more today, September 15th, 2023. Good morning, early birds. I'm Simone Perez, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. First up, the Air Force will miss all of its annual enlisted recruiting goals for the first time since 1999. It comes amid waning interest in military service and continuing administrative hurdles plaguing efforts to train the next generation of troops. The Air Force Recruiting Service boss said this week that the active duty Air Force made it about 90% of the way to its goal of nearly 27,000 enlisted recruits. It fell short by nearly 2,700 airmen. The Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard, however, fared worse with 30% shortfalls in each component. The Reserve had hoped to bring in 9,300 and the Guard nearly 11,800 enlisted airmen. But the Space Force, which falls under the Department of the Air Force, did fare better. It surpassed its enlisted goal of 472 new Guardians. All those numbers will be finalized after the year's last batch of new airmen and Guardians ship out to basic military training next week. How this impacts Air Force operations, though, remains to be seen. Officials do worry it will hinder U.S. efforts to counter Chinese and Russian aggression and to win future wars. Brigadier General Christopher Amrine leads the Air Force recruiting efforts. He commended a slew of changes to policies around drug use, body composition, tattoos, and more. He said more than 1,000 people have entered the Air Force because of those tweaks. Amrine said he is cautiously optimistic about surpassing next year's goal. The Air Force hopes to bring in 25,900 new active-duty enlisted airmen next fiscal year. Another important story, Pentagon officials said U.S. troops have not restarted counterterrorism operations in Niger. That comes one day after the head of U.S. Air Forces for Europe and Africa said the U.S. military had been able to resume some manned aircraft and drone counterterrorism operations in the country. But, according to the Pentagon, those missions are only for protecting U.S. forces, not more broad counterterrorism efforts.
We have secured these approvals with the appropriate authorities, and the U.S., I will say, always reserves the right to conduct operations to protect our forces and personnel if required.
The spokesman for Air Forces in Africa said the Air Force General's comments about resuming operations were in reference to the air component, not the overall counterterrorism mission in Niger. Here's why it matters. The U.S. has made Niger its main regional outpost. It's used for wide-ranging patrols by armed drones and other counter-terror operations against Islamic extremists. The bases are a critical part of America's overall counterterrorism efforts in West Africa. In late July, a military junta in Niger ousted the country's president, and since then, the 1,100 U.S. forces deployed in the country have been confined inside their military bases. Last week, the Pentagon said some military personnel and assets had been moved from the air base near the capital of Niger to another nearly 600 miles away. In other news, 2 U.S. senators are pressing the Defense Department on whether a new medical screening system hinders recruitment. This is based on past reporting from Military Times. For more on this, Marine Corps Times reporter Irene Lowenson joins the episode today. So, Irene, could you tell us about the initial report from Military Times that sparked this interest by lawmakers?
So my colleague Jeff Zazulowicz and I spoke with recruiters from different services about the challenges that they're actually seeing on the ground as recruiters. There's been a lot of commentary from military leaders and think tankers and journalists and politicians about what might be causing the military's recruiting difficulties. The truth is there are a lot of different factors at play, but recruiters said that one factor they see having a really big impact is the rollout of new health record system called MHS Genesis. What Genesis does is it allows the military at the entrance processing stations to look at applicants' historical health records. So their past prescriptions, their past doctor visits, and so forth, and kind of flag old health conditions or ongoing health conditions, including ones that might be disqualifying for service. So let's say you had a prescription for an asthma inhaler. Previously, legally you had to self-report that, but some people wouldn't always. But under Genesis, if Genesis flags that inhaler prescription, you either would be disqualified or you'd have to secure a medical waiver. Rachel Cohen, also at Military Times, reported that across the services, there's been an increase in the number of waivers that applicants are seeking in order to be able to enlist. And because waivers are a time-intensive process, it slows down the recruiting process, and recruiters told us that sometimes young people kind of lose interest in military service during that time, which contributes to the recruitment issues, they said.
So, 2 senators send a letter to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. What were they asking in that letter to him?
So this was Senators Elizabeth Warren and Richard Blumenthal, both Democrats, and they asked a lot of questions, but some of the most interesting ones to me are they asked for detailed information about how many waivers the military had to give out post-Genesis, and how long the recruitment process from the first time that applicant steps into the recruiter's office to the applicant signing the contract. The senators asked, how long is that process, and has it increased? And there was a Pentagon watchdog report that suggests that it has, in fact, increased. The senators also asked, hey, Pentagon, is there anything you're doing to evaluate or to reevaluate what kinds of medical conditions are disqualifying? Because they didn't really get into the why, but you might imagine that they're thinking about certain medical conditions that are on the list as being immediately disqualifying that in their view might not warrant immediate disqualification or might not warrant forcing people to track down waivers. The senators also raised questions about how the military is going to protect the private patient information that's housed within Genesis. Because Genesis isn't just screening applicants, it also it's a health record system used throughout DoD and even VA. And so one question is this data going to be sold to third parties? What are you going to do to make sure that no cyber attacks bust in and take out this health information?
Thanks, Irene. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please like and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Also on your radar for today, a new Defense Department medical report shows that military cases of a medical condition made worse by shaving have skyrocketed since 2000. Most of the increase was in the past 2 years. Data shows that cases of this skin irritation, known as pseudofolliculitis, Barbe, or PFB, are soaring. Here's why it matters. This comes as multiple services consider relaxing or amending the military-wide prohibition on beards. The condition causes painful inflammation and razor bumps. It affects some 45% of Black service members and is one of the few reasons for granting a rare military shaving waiver. So get this. According to Defense Health Agency's report in August, there were 50 reported cases of PFB in 2000. In 2022, there were 2,404. That's an increase of 4,708%. Let's look at the numbers since 2020. Cases are up for PFB from about 500 Black troops to more than 1,400 troops in that time frame. For white and Hispanic troops, cases are up from 150 troops to about 400. The data survey did not address the entire population of people in the armed forces with beard waivers, which can also be granted in conjunction with religious exemptions. And now, here are some other stories that we're hearing chirps about. The U.S. State Department approved a possible deal to sell more than 25 F-35A fighter jets to South Korea for more than $5 billion. The Wall Street Journal reported that according to U.S. officials, the U.S. plans to redirect some of its foreign military financing allocated for Egypt to Taiwan. That's related to what it says is Egypt's failure to make progress on human rights and other issues. Navy Admiral Lisa Franchetti testified yesterday in the Senate as part of her confirmation hearing for Chief of Naval Operations. Senator Elizabeth Warren asked Franchetti about the impact of the ongoing hold in the Senate on military promotions.
It would take about 3 to 4 months to move all of the people around, but it will take years to recover from the promotion, if confirmed, for the promotion delays that we would see forward.
So years to come, our military experts project China wants to be able to take Taiwan by 2027, and we'll still be trying to repair the damage inflicted by these holds.
The Air Force's next stealth bomber, the B-21 Raider, is conducting engine runs. Officials from the service and manufacturer Northrop Grumman said at a conference this week that the bomber remains on track for its first flight this year. And today marks National POW MIA Recognition Day. The day honors U.S. service members who were prisoners of war and those still missing in action from every conflict since and including World War II. And on this day in history, in 1959, Nikita Khrushchev became the first Soviet head of state to visit the United States. That's it for us this morning. To get more top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on social media at @defense_news and at Military Times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted and produced by me, Zimone Z. Perez. Today's episode featured stories by Rachel Cohen, The Associated Press, Jeff Zazulowicz, Irene Lowenson, and Hope Hodge-Seck. Our podcast editor is Jessica Edwards, and our editor-in-chief is Mike Bruce. Have a great day.